Today, we're looking at the Ford F150 and the Toyota Tundra, two of America's most beloved trucks. We'll peek into the technical evolution of both trucks. We'll also see their best model years and their worst if you're looking to buy a used truck. So buckle up and let's get going. In 2016, a Louisiana man did over 1 million miles on his Toyota Tundra. His truck was an '07 model, and it was 8 years old and still going strong. He had been logging about 125,000 miles per year. Of course, he had regularly serviced his truck, and that's why it lasted extremely long like that. In fact, he had serviced the truck at the dealership 117 times over the years. Anyway, that year, Toyota gave him a brand new 2016 Toyota Tundra in exchange for his '07 model. Then Toyota disassembled his old one to study its durability and reliability. Of course, many people already view Toyota as a very reliable brand, and this just goes to show further that if you maintain your car regularly, you can go a long way. But guess who's the biggest competitor of the Tundra? It's the Ford F150. It's been America's #1 best-selling pickup truck since 1977. How do you compete with a popular vehicle like that? Well, let's rewind and see how the race started between these two. The Ford F-Series began in 1948, but it wasn't until 1975, during the 6th generation of the F-Series, that America saw the F-150 line. For full history, check out my video on the Ford F-150. It was 1999. Toyota had another pickup already in the market when they released the Tundra. But the Tundra was the first full-size pickup from a Japanese manufacturer to be built in North America. The first generation Tundra immediately stood out from other Toyota pickups. It was the first Toyota pickup to offer a V8 engine. Toyota sold over 100,000 vehicles in its first year. Despite this, American perception of the Tundra was that it was a smaller and weaker truck than the competing Ford trucks. It would be an uphill battle for the Tundra. Around this time, Ford F-Series was already in its 10th generation. At the time, the driving experience was more carless. That's because Ford wanted their trucks to have the comforts of SUVs. In 2001, the F-150 became the first vehicle of its size to offer 4 full-size doors. This model offered the 5.4-liter V8. It was the first overhead camshaft engine ever installed in a full-size pickup truck. In the meantime, the Tundra was still in its infancy. Toyota gave the Tundra a new grille. They also introduced the double cab, which had 4 doors and additional space for backseat passengers to better compete in the market. Meanwhile, Ford launched its 11th generation F-Series in 2004. The F-150 was even larger and taller. This generation saw a new platform, including rear shock absorbers that were installed outside the frame to reduce wheel bounce and improve ride quality, and in the independent front suspension, vacuum-driven front wheel hubs for all-wheel drive versions were added. In '04 and '05, Ford F-150 received many awards and recognition. This generation really paved the way in taking F-150 more mainstream. In the meantime, the Tundra had a towing capacity of 7,100 pounds. It was a good step forward for the Tundra. It got positive safety reviews. The problem was, it didn't offer full-size truck drivers enough of what they expected from a large pickup. And Toyota understood that. That's why Toyota introduced its 2nd generation Tundra. The Tundra got larger than the previous generation. Stylistically, it has similarities with the Tacoma. It also offered a brand new engine, a 5.7-liter V8 engine that output 381 horsepower. Toyota wanted the Tundra to appeal more to construction workers. That's why this generation Tundra started seeing extra large door handles, a deck rail system, integrated tow hitch, even a headrest that would fit a person wearing a hard hat. Meanwhile, at Ford, the F-150 was growing in size again, almost getting close to heavy-duty trucks. Starting in 2009, for the first time in history, a V8 engine came standard on all F-Series models, instead of a 6-cylinder engine. The F-150 was also noticeably taller and larger. All versions of the cab had 4 doors. Overall, this generation F-150 appeared even more aggressive, as Ford was now starting to race with the Ram 1500 and Chevy Silverado. In the meantime, the Tundra was still in its second generation, but 2014 saw a major design update. In fact, some people consider it the start of a third generation, but actually it's not, because there were no changes to the chassis or powertrain. But the changes that did come included a larger grille, more prominent fenders on front and back, and overall a more chiseled look. Toyota also made performance improvements, like better suspension and handling. That same year, 2014, Toyota introduced a fresh new trim called 1794. The 1794 edition commemorated the founding of the cattle ranch in San Antonio that was the site of the Toyota assembly plant where the Tundras were built. The 1794 edition reflected a Western cowboy theme. For example, it had saddle brown leather upholstery, imitation suede inserts, and matching leather bits on the shift console, door trim, and instrument panel. Meanwhile, soon after, Ford introduced the 13th generation F-Series. For the first time, the F-150 came with aluminum panels versus steel panels from previous generations. This makes the F-150 lighter by 750 pounds. The F-150 also turned more family-friendly starting with this era. Ford is currently at its 14th generation F-Series. The 2021 F-150 underwent a redesign of 92% of its parts. Ford also introduced an optional gasoline-electric hybrid powertrain. Ford plans to introduce a fully electric F-150 by 2022, compete with the GMC Hummer EV and Tesla Cybertruck. In the meantime, Toyota introduced the new special edition models of the 2021 Tundra, called Trail and Nightshade. The changes focus more on the truck styling rather than feature improvements. As with all vehicles, both the F-150 and the Tundra have had their share of good years and bad. Some model years are just better than others, and some model years have received more consumer complaints than others. So if you want a reliable, used F-150 or Tundra, which model years should you consider and which ones should you avoid? Let's start with F-150. Year 2019 is worthy because that year saw the highest towing capacity of any of its contemporaries, towing over 13,000 pounds. It's a serious truck, but it's also comfortable. This generation saw a few safety recall concerns and a limited number of concerns about the powertrain, but overall it's generally reliable. Years 2018, 2017, and 2014 rated well overall too. What about years to avoid in the Fords? That includes 2004 to 2009. Years 2004 and 2005 especially were disaster years for Ford and caused Ford to lose some customer trust. That's because those model years faced severe engine and transmission failures. Been a lot of recalls for these model years too, including recalls for inadvertent airbag deployment, which can actually be quite dangerous and cause serious injury. Except for the year 2014, the F-150s for model years 2010 to 2016 fared better, but still took a beating. Complaints for those years were about power loss while driving and also braking problems. The brakes would fail and the rotors would need to be replaced earlier than expected. Well, what about the Toyota Tundra? Among the best in the used Tundras include the model year 2015 because it got a facelift from the previous model and had noteworthy off-roading capability. The 2013 Tundra is worth noting because it won several awards, including 5-star safety option from the National Highway Traffic Safety Association. It was also the first Tundra model to offer the TRD Rock Warrior trim. The 2009 model year had one of the fewest customer complaints. But what about the Tundra's bad years? Well, one model year received the most customer complaints. The 2007 Tundra was problematic because it had the most engine problems, anywhere from air injection pump failure, sticking air pumps, and knocking in the pistons. There's also reports from the NHTSA about problems with the speed control, engine cooling system, and even accelerator pedal. Model years 2008 and 2005 had similar engine concerns, but not as many complaints as 2007. But the worst Tundra to date is the model year 2012, based on volume of customer complaints and average repair costs. The most common problem for that year was air induction pump failure, and that's an expensive repair job. It can be over $3,000. Another common problem for that year has been early transmission failure, even as early as 9,000 to 10,000 miles. And that's not cheap either. It can be over $5,000. That all said, here's an interesting fact about the 2012 Tundra. Did you know that in October 2012, the Toyota Tundra was used to tow the Space Shuttle Endeavour over the Los Angeles freeway? Imagine that. The Space Shuttle weighed 155,000 pounds, and the tow equipment added another 120,000 pounds. The Tundra was only rated to tow 10,000 pounds, and Toyota said the truck was not modified or enhanced to accomplish the tow. Of course, there was a specially designed rig to help the truck pull the shuttle, but even with that, you can imagine how much muscle and power were still used to the max. Ford's F-Series remains America's best-selling truck for the 44th consecutive year. Last year, Ford sold more than 787,000 of the F-Series. The numbers speak for themselves. These trucks hold their value well. Depending on condition, they can hold around 50% of their original value after 5 years. That's 25% more than average vehicles. The Toyota Tundra doesn't even come close to Ford in sales. Toyota sold over 109,000 Tundras last year, but it is known for longevity, reliability, and good resale value. Even used ones can carry a lot of life if regular maintenance is done. For 8 of the last 9 years, Consumer Reports has named the Tundra the most reliable pickup in America. Even though the Tundra doesn't have all the latest and greatest technology, Tundra's advantage is that it carries the Toyota quality and dependability. Recently, a 1998 Toyota Tacoma sold for over $17,000. We're talking about a 23-year-old truck with a manual transmission. The opening bid was only $6,000, but the final closing bid is a steal if you consider that Toyota trucks from the 90s are known for reliability. And plus, this truck unbelievably had only 64,000 miles on it. Expectations are that the auction winner may resell it for more than $20,000, which is impressive considering that the latest base model Tacoma is selling for just under $27,000. Today, the Toyota Tacoma is the Taco Supreme of mid-sized trucks. But did you know that it was way smaller when it was originally released? Back then, it was just a street taco. That was decades ago. And it was simply called the Toyota Pickup. It's like naming your dog Dog. But then, finally, Toyota did give it a name in 1995. In its early days, it was a compact truck, short and stout, but it was reliable. And since then, it's gained a reputation for durability. Nowadays, though, the Tacoma is a lot bigger. We're talking almost a foot taller, more than half a foot fatter, and 3 feet longer. It went off the beaten path and now plays in the mid-sized truck class, boasting serious off-road capability with the Tacoma TRD Pro Editions. So it's come a long way, literally. And while the Tacoma long left the compact truck arena, actually, compact seems to be making its way back. That's why Ford released the new Maverick. The Maverick is Ford's smallest pickup available. This compact truck shares the same unibody platform with the Bronco Sport SUV. So is it tough enough? Is it truck enough? The Maverick truck may be new, but its name isn't. Back in 1970, Ford had a compact rear-wheel drive 2-door sedan and later a 4-door sedan, which they named the Maverick. The name Maverick comes from a word for on-branded range animals. Back then, Ford's intent was to compete against Toyota and Datsun, especially after the Ford Falcon sales took a nosedive. But the Maverick didn't last long either, and Ford discontinued the sedan just a few years later in 1977. In more recent days, Ford reassigned the Maverick nameplate to their all-new compact hybrid truck. The Maverick is a different animal than its older brother, the full-size F-Series. Yet, after just 12 weeks, Ford already received 100,000 reservations for the new Maverick. To put that into perspective, the new Ford Bronco got more than double that amount in just 2 weeks alone. And that excludes the Bronco Sports numbers. In fact, it's so overwhelming that Ford spokesman said that some consumers may not receive their Bronco order for another year and a half. But back to the Maverick. It's not a bad start, especially considering it's a whole new player in the compact truck market. Guess which states most of these reservations come from? California, Texas, and Florida, the warm states. Evidently, LA and San Francisco Bay Area are the biggest fans, but it's not at all surprising, considering the Maverick's base price starts at just under $20,000. Here's an interesting twist. Ford isn't really aiming to compete with other truck buyers. Rather, they're targeting consumers who would otherwise buy a compact sedan or a hatchback. They want the convenience of a pickup truck, too. Most people may guess that a full-size truck has more power than a mid-size or compact truck. After all, logic says a larger truck means more room for a larger engine, larger tires, and so forth. But you shouldn't disregard or completely ignore the smaller classes. They're worth considering because did you know that some automakers include the same engine in all of their trucks? So truck size itself doesn't always reflect horsepower nor torque. Some smaller pickups offer impressive power and performance, so don't be deceived by size. Pretty much every heavy-duty truck ad mentions horsepower and torque. But believe it or not, some people assume that horsepower and torque are the same. They may not know the difference between the two or how it impacts truck performance. So let's talk a bit about it. By the way, did you know that the term horsepower originated from a Scottish inventor? This was James Watt. back in 1776. He was working on a steam engine, which ran on coal. He improved engine performance and fuel economy, but he needed a way to convey how much better his engine was than his competitors. How else would you do that if you're living in an era when most people were still using horses? So he explained his engine by comparing it to horse-driven machines like grain mills. It made sense to his customers because they could relate to it. Watt measured the output of a steam engine by comparing it to the power output of a standard workhorse. So how do you measure the power of a horse? We can imagine many different ways, but the method he used was a rope and pulley system. He saw that the load of an average horse could lift 1 foot high off the ground in 1 second, 550 pounds. And that's the standard he used to define 1 horsepower. In modern terms, we could also say 1 horsepower translates to approximately 746 watts. For sure, 550 pounds sounds like it's a lot, but consider this. A typical house garage door is half a horsepower, and there are others that are even 2 horsepower. Imagine 2 horses pulling to lift up your heavy-duty garage door. Horsepower and torque are related. Both express engine power, but in different ways. You use torque to calculate horsepower. Torque refers to the amount of rotational or twisting force that was applied to do some work. Torque is what you get your truck from 0 to 60 in seconds. With combustion engines, high torque means less delay between the driver pressing the accelerator pedal and the truck moving. You could say it's also what pushes you back into your seat as all the horses in your engine take off in a single rush. Torque is a function of many factors, including engine size, design, and operation. The more torque your truck has, the harder it can work to tow, haul, or climb steep grades. If towing and hauling is your primary need, then torque is one of the things you'll want to look at. Typical mainstream trucks can output some 100 to 400 pound-feet of torque. The truck engine generates torque when its pistons reciprocate up and down and cause the crankshaft to rotate continuously. The torque gets transferred to the transmission and drivetrain and ultimately to the spinning wheels. Truck makers advertise their power and torque so you can have the right expectations on truck performance, provided, of course, you can understand the difference. Let's see how it applies to Ford Mavericks and the Toyota Tacoma. The 2022 Ford Maverick comes standard as full electric hybrid. It comes with 2 engine options, a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder full hybrid that outputs 191 horsepower and 155 pound-feet of torque. It also comes with a 2-liter EcoBoost engine, which is Ford's turbocharged inline-4 version, which generates 250 horsepower and 277 pound-feet of torque. The Toyota Tacoma comes with a 2.7-liter 4-cylinder engine that outputs 159 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque, and a 3.5-liter V6 engine capable of 278 horsepower, 265 pound-feet of torque. As far as transmission is concerned, the Maverick full hybrid comes with a CVT transmission option. The EcoBoost option uses an 8-speed automatic. Believe it or not, the Tacoma still offers a manual transmission and a 6-speed automatic as an option. Let's talk about towing and payload capacity. It's no surprise that most full-size pickups have some of the top towing capacities available. Typically, we can expect at least 7,000 pounds and more. Mid-size pickup trucks can range anywhere between 2,000 to 7,000 pounds. The Maverick's maximum towing capability is 4,000 pounds if you choose the optional 4K tow package. It is, after all, a compact truck. Compare that to the Tacoma, which can tow 6,400 pounds, which means it's in the upper range of the mid-size class. That's actually a notable difference, 50% more in fact. But if your truck need is for general use, then how much your truck bed can carry is probably more important than towing. When it comes to cargo space and payload, obviously you can't fit more volume and weight in a full-size truck bed than in a mid-size or smaller truck. But believe it or not, the difference in payload between the two classes isn't extraordinary. Usually it's some 100 to 300 pounds. So unless you have a specific or unique need, a mid-sized truck can still carry a good decent amount of cargo. The Ford Maverick, which is considered compact, has a 4.5-foot bed and can carry a max load of 1,500 pounds, which is more than the Tacoma's 1,155 pounds. So the Maverick wins in terms of being able to carry more weight, about 20% more. Let's look at fuel economy. It's a no-brainer that truck size impacts fuel economy. Full size is simply larger and heavier. Extra weight means you need more power and fuel to perform. But mid-size means you have a little bit less truck. It weighs lighter, so it puts less stress on your truck mechanics, and you get better fuel economy. The Toyota Tacoma travels 18 miles per gallon in the city and 22 miles on a highway. The Ford Maverick Hybrid can travel 40 miles in the city and 33 miles on the highway. In general, Ford says the Maverick can travel up to 500 miles on a single tank of gas, all because of its hybrid technology. Right now, Toyota plans to offer hybrid version for all U.S. models by 2025, so we'll need to wait a few more years to see what that means for the Tacoma. But for now, the Maverick comes standard as a hybrid. So this begs the question, should we go for a hybrid like the Maverick or a conventional gasoline car like the Tacoma? Recently, hybrid vehicles have been gaining more popularity and are now among the best-selling on the market. Of course, there are pros and cons to each. Fundamentally, gas trucks have a lower sticker price, lower maintenance, better acceleration and speed, and better power. But on the downside, they offer less gas mileage and more emissions. Hybrids, on the other hand, offer higher mileage, cleaner energy, better resale value, but their maintenance can be higher. All in all, which should you choose between the Maverick and the Tacoma? If towing capacity is your priority, go with the Tacoma. If you need a daily pickup truck to drive to work and also use for weekend activities and want better gas mileage, then Maverick might work just fine. If you had the ability to buy a full-size SUV, would you? Based on market trend and stats, my guess is yes. They say almost everyone wants an SUV, even though in practicality, far less actually need one for its full capabilities. Did you know that Americans buy far more trucks and SUVs than any other country in the world? The fact is, most Americans who buy an SUV do so because they can. Americans love cars, and oftentimes, for SUV fans, it's more about desire and style rather than off-roading needs. It's so popular and the demand is so strong that it's hard to convince consumers about the downsides of the SUV. Namely, that it's generally more expensive, offers poor fuel economy, can sometimes be hard to enter and exit, and also very hard to park in a tight garage or carted parking lot because of its size. The truth is, many people buy them because they like the large interior space, comfort, flexibility, all-weather performance, and style that SUVs generally offer. Since 2014, the trucks and SUV market has been growing steadily. This is why sedan sales have been decreasing. Today, trucks and SUVs together account for 70% of the car market. That's how big it is. 3 years ago, it hit a record high of almost 30 million worldwide. Of course, numbers like this have the power to impact price. That's why the price of many SUVs have become similar to the prices of competing sedans. Taken all together, SUVs offer competitive price, off-road capabilities, higher levels of comfort, larger trunks, and greater safety. Selling SUVs is much more profitable than selling mid-sized sedans or electric vehicles. This is why the big car companies like GM, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, even some in the premium segment like Maserati, BMW, and Porsche have also entered the SUV market. Ford, for example, is projecting that by the end of the decade, 90% of vehicles produced in North America will be SUVs and pickups. Many consumers who consider buying an SUV will call out its power, large size, and greater safety. Imagine a collision between an SUV and a small hatchback. The SUV is more likely to suffer less damage to itself and the driver. On top of that, the SUV rides high with ground clearance that gives the driver a good view of the road ahead, while enabling the car for easy off-road travel. And the large volume of cargo space makes it practical and comfortable for everyone and everything inside. These features help SUVs to be an ideal vehicle for commuters who value comfort and style, outdoor activities, and adventures. And it's not just about cars. As everyone knows, Americans love big cars, even if it's not always used as intended. You feel invincible to ride a beast so high. And this is perfectly acceptable in the U.S. because unlike Europe, we have a lot of roads. The truth is, unless you live in a large city like New York or LA, the average American in suburbia doesn't worry whether he's able to find a parking space to fit on narrow streets. These questions don't even come to mind. Another purchase driver for the SUV can be the ego booster. If you can afford to get whatever you want, not just what you need, why not? Sometimes it can make you feel good to own something so stately. In this way, you can say an SUV isn't just a vehicle, but it's a status symbol. If you don't believe me, just look at a phone. Most of us likely don't have a flip phone anymore, but a smartphone. How new or outdated is your phone? And how do you feel when you see your friend's latest and greatest newly released smartphone? You're probably thinking this happens mostly with teenagers who love new devices, and there's some truth to that. But it happens to adults too, especially if you're in the workforce or social setting. Sometimes we can measure ourselves or others by what generation smartphone we have. Even if your smartphone works perfectly fine, it's a year old and a newer model has been released, somehow you must have it. It's a similar thing with cars. The only difference is that with cars, most people tend to keep their cars for years instead of switching it out every single year. How many SUV owners do you know who are serious off-roaders? On the contrary, probably the normal drivers who usually drive their SUVs on regular roads for just regular purposes. By the way, not all SUVs that advertise off-roading characteristics behave off-road in the absolute truest sense of the word. Some of them, if they were ever to see dirt, would immediately sink and get stuck as soon as their wheels touch soft soil or deep mud. By the way, if you haven't seen my video on the best off-roaders, check it out. One last point. It's about maybe versus reality. We all have this tendency to assume we ever want to maybe do a camping trip on a mountain or haul sheets of drywall, or maybe transport a lot of friends on a road trip. Well, we have a large SUV and it's always ready to go. And it's true, it's great for outdoors and epic adventures. But the reality is that most people use their SUV for daily commuting and daily general driving. So just stop and think about this. What's wrong with renting a $25 U-Haul truck for one time you might move stuff? Or renting an SUV or minivan for a short trip? That can save you a lot more money in the long run if you think about it. But the thing is, most people don't think that way. Instead, they think about the maybes and then opt for the large SUV. And car marketers know that. It's their job and passion to observe consumer behavior and present those maybes in their ads to feed you the dream. Again, these outdoor day trips and road trips are good. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy them too. But just remember, they are more occasional occurrences rather than daily events for most people. But don't just take my perspective on things. When you're deciding on your next family car, the SUV does offer many unique advantages, namely power and performance, large comfortable interior space, and the ability to sit high for better visibility. So let's compare the two popular full-size SUVs, the Toyota Sequoia versus the Ford Expedition. Let's start with the Toyota Sequoia. Did you know that the Sequoia was originally going to be named the Highlander? But as we can see today, that name is used for Toyota's crossover. The Sequoia is a full-size SUV based on the Toyota Tundra pickup. Toyota introduced more than 20 years ago, back in the year 2000, and it was assembled at the Toyota manufacturing plant in Princeton, Indiana. This is Toyota's first full-size SUV in North America. It's also the largest Toyota SUV to date, bigger than the Land Cruiser and the Highlander. It's surprisingly maneuverable, easy to park despite its large size, can accelerate from 0 to 60 in 7.4 seconds. The seats are large and comfortable, and wind noise is almost inaudible. But I do have to say, you can sense this model has been around. The current generation debuted in 2008, so you can see why several people have commented that it feels outdated, and you should wait for the 2023 Toyota Sequoia redesign. For example, the 2022 model, while new, still has the same drivetrain we've seen for years. Toyota only offers the Sequoia with a naturally aspirated 5.7-liter V8 engine, which has made it to a 6-speed automatic transmission. It's this outdated drivetrain that makes the Sequoia one of the thirstiest cars in Toyota's lineup. We're talking an EPA combined rating of 15 miles a gallon and a 2-wheel drive. The 4-wheel drive is rated at 14 miles a gallon. The outdated drivetrain also limits Sequoia's towing capacity to 7,400 pounds. To put that into perspective, Ford Expedition can tow up to 9,300 pounds. Generally, the Sequoia lasts 200,000 miles. The Sequoia is a Toyota. So in general, this means reliability, good suspension for off-roading and towing. That said, due to its outdated drivetrain, towing on this SUV is limited to 7,400 pounds, which is less than the Ford Expedition, which can handle up to 9,300 pounds. But now, let's look at the Ford Expedition. This is a 3-row SUV, and Ford introduced it in 1997 as its successor to the Ford Bronco. The Expedition was Ford's first full-size 4-door SUV. Like the Toyota Sequoia, the Ford Expedition is known as one of the most durable vehicles on the road, and it remains one of the best-selling large SUVs in the United States. And it's easy to see why. It's appealing, it offers impressive cargo and cabin space, and has great towing capability. So how does the Expedition compare with Sequoia? The Expedition is powered by a 3.5-liter EcoBoost twin-turbo V6 mated to a 10-speed automatic transmission that pair with rear or all-wheel drive. The standard can output 380 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. So horsepower is at par, but you get more torque with the Expedition. The Limited is boosted to 400 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. If you get the Timberline or Limited with the Stealth Performance Package, that's an extra boost up to 440 horsepower and 510 pound-feet of torque. Its drivetrain is what makes the car strong and powerful. As I mentioned before, we're talking a towing capability of 9,300 pounds, so we're talking more muscle. As far as fuel economy is concerned, the Expedition is a tad leg up. EPA rates the rear-wheel drive at 17 miles per gallon and 23 miles per gallon for city and highway, where all-wheel drive drops it to 22 on the highway. As far as the interior is concerned, first of all, you can't help but notice the 12-inch touchscreen, which is significantly larger than what you see in the Sequoia. The Expedition accommodates up to 8 passengers, as does the Sequoia. That being said, the Expedition is roomier and more comfortable due to 44-inch, 42-inch, and 36 inches of legroom in the first, second, and third rows. But that's not all. Just look at the cargo space. The Expedition offers about 2 more cubic feet of space. All in all, it seems fairly obvious to me who's the winner in my book between these two SUVs. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.